able to be here tonight. For the last couple of years, I've been unable due to prior engagement and a work schedule. It's interesting that every year we gather here in front of what I call the Suprema's Court. I don't call it the Supreme Court of the United States. I call it the Suprema's Court. And you know, it's interesting that a couple of days ago that this court made a ruling on a Seattle school case, and they used statistics. And as some of you may know, in a few months, it'll be almost like the 20th anniversary of Plexley versus Georgia, when this same Suprema's Court stated that you can use statistics to prove discrimination, but yet they just used it a couple of days ago. Also, in case some of you may not know, our dear beloved President George W. Bush today granted a commutation to Scooter Libby in his 30. Yes.
No.
And his reasoning was that he felt that the 30 months was too excessive. Now we must bear in mind, this is the same man, while governor of Texas. I don't know how many people he killed, how many lives he's responsible for, but yet I think he once stated that he never signed a warrant on an innocent person, but yet he never found those sentences to be too excessive. I am a native of Charleston, South Carolina. I was born, raised, and have my schooling. I went to the state of Florida by accident because it really was work related. Anyway, to make a long story short, I was arrested in Florida and I was charged with 3 horrible crimes: murder, rape, and robbery. Very horrific crimes. You know, crimes that anybody be mad at. You know, even I. You know, I was tried, convicted, and sentenced. But the only thing wrong with that picture was I was totally innocent of the crimes. You know, I've learned over the years, during the 14 and a half years that I spent on Florida's death row, that even though we may say that we have the most fairest, the most just, and the most humane system on planet Earth, I speak to you and say, I don't believe that. The state of Florida killed, while I was there, 16 people. I came within 15 hours of being number 17. You know, we all hear horrible stories about death row, the man and the woman. And we must remember that maybe today we are not doing, but when I was on death row, we had children. We had 15-year-olds on death row. And no one could tell me that a 15-year-old child is an adult. This, what we are gathered here today for, I don't know about you, but Abe, I've heard me mention a lot of times that when people approach me to make a statement or to grant a picture, and I tell them that we are dealing with a very, very serious issue here. So if you're looking for someone to hold your baby and smile before the camera, Shabak is not the person. Because you see, once again, we're dealing with life and death. And do we have the right to take that life? First, let me explain my position on capital punishment. I am not for capital punishment, and I am not against capital punishment. My position is I am against killing, whether that killing is done by an individual, a state, or a government dropping its bombs on innocent civilians. That is my position. I stand before you today as an individual who was not cleared by DNA. DNA was not around during my time. DNA came after my release. I stand here today because I had about 12 or 13 individuals that I call bulldogs. You know, a bulldog is different than any other dog. Different than a Rottweiler, German Shepherd, a Doberman Pinscher, anything. Why? Because if you tell a bulldog there's a bone buried down in that hole, that bulldog gonna keep digging and digging and digging until they find that bone. And that's what happened in my case. I had bulldogs, a dog. First, let me back up for a moment because I also must state about Florida. See, Florida have a law, or did have a law, that once you were convicted and sentenced to death, the attorney that handled your trial was the attorney that had to handle your appeal. However, once the attorney left your case, you were not bound by law or statute of receiving another lawyer. And this is what happened in my case. In August of 1977, I learned that my trial attorney and appeal attorney, Michael J. Shea, had left my case, and I was alone. So here was a young man on death row, no financial wherewithal, 8th grade education, and today I still have 8th grade education. But a lot of my friends would tell you that the only thing that separates me from a lawyer is a degree and license. I studied the law. I taught myself. So for 4 years, I kept myself alive. And only by a friend of mine named Deborah Fins, who was then working with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She was of the opinion that I was going to aid the state of Florida in killing me because I didn't have access to certain legal material. So she wrote me a letter and said she found an attorney named Richard Blumenthal who had just left the U.S. Attorney's Office in Connecticut, and while I agreed to him to see me. Upon learning about Mr. Blumenthal, I told Deborah no. She pleaded with me that I'm going to help Florida kill me. After 6 months, I agreed for Mr. Blumenthal to come to Stark, Florida. And believe me when I say Stark, Florida, where death row is at, the name fits it. It is Stark, Florida. Mr. Blumenthal, my first meeting lasted no more than 10 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Neither one of us stood, and we looked at each other. I asked him one question. To this day, he have never responded. He smiled. I said, Mr. Blumenthal, can you fight? He just smiled. That's all, just smiled. But there was something in that smile. And today, let me say something about Mr. Blumenthal. Back then, and even today as I stand before you, he still believed in capital punishment. But he also believed in justice and fairness. And so we went about teaching each other what we knew. And when my warrant was signed by then Governor Bob Graham, I think this was then that Dick somehow became a little bit of a convert. Not much, but a little bit. Because it was at this time when I was on death watch, awaiting execution, that Dick got a chance to see the criminal justice system up close. Up until that time, he had only looked at it from a lawyer's civil point of view. Because you see, capital punishment, as all of you out here know, and as Ms. Gail that you just got through so eloquently talking about, it just do not affect the person on death row. It affects the family, the guards, everyone involved. And some of you who know me know what family means to me. And when my warrant was signed and an execution date was set, and when my mother suffered a heart attack and a subsequent stroke, that hurt me.